Well, who would have thought in Dunedin today one of the hottest topics of conversation would be power poles. Richard Healy, who was known as a whistleblower, someone who released some information, who shared some information around the power pole situation in Dunedin a few weeks ago, brought the attention to Dunedinites and the people of the region of Otago as to potential issues within the power pole system worked and looked after by Delta and Aurora. What has happened in the last few days is we've had another leak from a group called Line Tech Consultants. They're not the leakers. There was a report done by Line Tech Consultants that actually have not only backed up perhaps Mr. Healy's claims or allegations, but maybe expanded on them to show us a bigger problem than perhaps we even thought of a few weeks ago with the issues around power poles in the region. Vaughan, you actually are intimately have an intimate understanding of this. You're writing the stories based around Delta.
Yep.
What have I done wrong by setting that up? What do we need to know?
Well, I think what the leak shows, the biggest thing is it shows that, and this is what Richard Healy said about it, he said that it shows that the company knew about the problem almost as soon as Grady Cameron, the chief executive, came on board. And what Mr. Healy says is that it shows that they can't plead ignorance. They knew about the problem and they didn't act quickly enough to prevent what is happening now, where they're having to replace 3,000 poles in a year at a cost of $30 million. So yeah, so basically it looks as though from the report that they ignored the warnings in the report and now it's coming back to bite them.
So let's have a look at the report that was leaked. It was by, as I said, the report was by Line Tech Consultants. The senior consultant, Alistair Glyn Jones, said this. This is Q3, Tim. Q3. Mr. Glyn Jones predicted as many as 32,406 poles would need replacing in the 10 years from 2010, which would have required a 20-fold increase in the number of poles replaced per year. So we were told a couple of weeks ago, within the last couple of weeks, 3,000 poles are sort of ready to fall over. I don't want to summarise too badly, but are in a grade 0 or grade 1 situation.
Yep.
But there's potentially another 30-ish thousand poles that in the next 10 years are going to need to be replaced. And if 3,000 poles is costing 30 million, that therefore means what? 30,000 is 300 million?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you can sort of you can say those sort of numbers. I guess what you should take from that figure is that this is a problem which is going to be around for years. The network's so old that poles are going to just keep coming up for replacement in the next 10 years. It's not going to go away. Whether it's 30,000 poles that need to be replaced or 20,000, it's going to be a huge number and it's going to cost an awful lot of money.
Has there been any conversation, have we heard any conversation around an alternate source of getting power to our houses, i.e. should we put the power poles or the power sources underground? It's a question I've actually asked Delta, and I'm now seeing that this could be hundreds of millions over 10 years. Maybe it's a more serious question that needs to be put to them. You know, we're in a climate where we have snow 2, 3, 4, 5 times a year sometimes, especially in the hills. It's a perfect place to have underground power, isn't it?
I think you've got a good point, but for whatever reason, it's just not something that Delta or Aurora are interested in. Maybe they just don't want to pay that amount of money. Yeah, I'm not sure. It's not something that I've actually looked into a lot yet.
So is it a DCC issue? Do DCC just need to step in and go, this is what we're doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's ramifications obviously for the people that run Delta and Aurora, and there's a sort of a new development in that at a council meeting on next Tuesday, Councillor David Benson Pope has put forward a motion that the council ask DCHL, which is the council's holding company, to explain whether they have confidence in the board that runs Delta and Aurora. So, you know, I'm pretty sure they will go ahead and ask that question. What the answer will be, I don't know, but it's certainly, you know, you're looking at some pressure on the people that are running, you know, the board that runs those companies, and after that, I would imagine some of the top employees there.
Because am I right, Vaughan, in asking from your reporting that it's fairly evident now that these issues were known of about 18 months before the current CEO came on board?
Well, it was 18 months after. What we found out was that Grady Cameron, when he came on, he asked these consultants to look at the way the network was managed, and see if there's room for improvement. And they came in and said there was a whole lot of room for improvement in a number of areas, including power poles. And for whatever reason, it took them 4 years to significantly increase the number of poles that were being replaced. And even then, it was nowhere near the level suggested in the report.
There are also people who've sort of asked why Delta are spending a lot of money sponsoring rugby, when possibly they should be fixing their power poles. That's just a sideline.
And the report said that there was 800 poles replaced in the past 2 years. So say 400 poles a year. So obviously talking about potentially 30,000 poles over 10 years, if they have to replace them all, they certainly need to increase that output of poles being replaced to get anywhere near that.
I think there's an acceptance from all parties, including Delta and Aurora now and Grady Cameron, that they need to ramp up the number of poles they're replacing. And there's going to be a lot more than 400 poles replaced each year, even after the 3,000 poles. I guess the last thing I'll say is with this story, I think it's going to continue rolling on, because there's a whole lot of people out there who feel that that basically, while it's great that they're replacing 3,000 poles, there's a whole lot of people who need to take responsibility for what's happened. And I guess until that happens, I think that the critics of Delta and Aurora, like Richard Healy and the person who freshly leaked the document yesterday, and a number of staff, are going to continue banging on about this issue. It's not going to go away.